Malcolm, how you doing?
I'm better than Michael Burry. I can say that.
Michael Burry.
Yeah, just, looking at the fact that we were just talking about this guy, sort of moving the markets in his own way because of his shorts that got reported on NVIDIA and Palantir. I think that was a week ago. And now the headline this week is that he's shutting down the fund all of a sudden with a ominous announcement. Look out for Thanksgiving Day or the day before Thanksgiving or whatever he put. Like that looks a little bit like defeat to me.
That looks a little bit like an Alex Jones move, which is there's going to be something big happening right before Thanksgiving Day. And
that's a good impression, by the way.
Don't flatter me. He was right. He was right one time. And I just have to imagine if you're in Michael Burry's orbit, how I know you run a marathon. You don't bring it up that much, but there are people where you talk to them for 30 seconds and they're like, don't forget I ran a marathon. And I feel like with Michael Burry, it might be one of those things where within 2 minutes, start the clock. He's gonna remind you that he did call the 2008 bubble and he will do it again.
So this is why I told you everybody, it feels like, and I don't mean literally everybody, but more people than not are lining up to go on TV and on podcasts and everywhere else that they have a megaphone to tell people that this is the time when the market's going to crumble, just so that they can be on record, time stamped on that date as being the dude that called it.
Mm-hmm. Because anytime it crumbles between now and the next 5 years, you can be the person who called it. And our first episode was literally, yes, AI is in a bubble. So I don't want to put us necessarily as is better than anyone else who may be doing that right now, Malcolm. But I think this was interesting of just how quickly the news cycle goes, where Michael Burry makes a big AI bet, but then he's shutting down his hedge fund, but not exactly admitting defeat. And people can shut down a hedge fund for any number of reasons. Maybe a big investor pulled out. We don't really know what's going on there, but it is the AI trade becomes faster. It just feels like time is moving faster and I can't keep up with what's going on sometimes.
Equally of note, Masayoshi Son selling $6 billion worth of NVIDIA shares initially looked like yet another ominous sign to investors, at least retail investors who hold NVIDIA shares. Let me be very specific. And then when you dig a little deeper, you come to find out, well, he really needed that money very, very badly because he's on the hook for a $30 billion investment into OpenAI. And the only place that he really had to take the money from, because his fund is so illiquid, is his NVIDIA shares. But I saw a breakdown of the math on this. I'm getting a little bit off into the weeds, but I find this fascinating. I saw the breakdown on the math of when Masayoshi Son initially bought NVIDIA shares back in 2019, I want to say. And he would have had something like a 2,300% return on those shares had he just stayed the course. But because he sold them and then bought them back in 2025, he bought them in March 2025, right before quote unquote Liberation Day. So he had a really strong return, 40 some odd % on the position anyway, nothing to sneeze at. But compared to where he would have been had he just held the shares, socked them away and not been trying to time the market. This is a great lesson in market timing being a fool's errand. Like, he would have done so much better and been able to buy all of OpenAI by himself probably.
And part of this is he loves using debt. He doesn't mind going into anything highly levered. And to your point, for anyone looking for a sign, he also sold NVIDIA in 2019. So I wouldn't take it as necessarily a market call from him. And he has been tremendously right on a few things. There's the legendary story where he drew up an iPhone and said, I almost said Tim Cook. It was the other one, Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, you got to make this. I drew it, and I'm kind of an inventor of the iPhone. And he has been right in a few regards. He's taken a tremendous amount of risk, but on specifically NVIDIA, sometimes his timing is a little bit off, specifically on AI and real estate. He bets
big and he wins big, but he also loses big at the end of it.
Let's get into this Warren Buffett letter. This is sort of this is the solve. This is the bomb if you're reading through the news and it's your grandfatherly Warren Buffett saying goodbye. He had he's 95 now. He's finally leaving the CEO seat. And all of his letters, I think, when they come out, or even if you want to read them in the past, they're worth your attention. And I really enjoyed reading this one, Malcolm. Basically, themes of gratitude, luck, what comes next at Berkshire Hathaway, talking about how his children are going to do charity work with the money he's leaving behind. And as a reminder, his children are 72, 40, and 67. So yeah, Warren, you can enjoy retirement right now. But when you were going through that letter, anything really stand out to you or any reflections on it?
My big reflection is that Warren Buffett, is a baby boomer's dream. And I mean that in terms of he's 95 years old and finally retiring. He's retiring a multi-billionaire. He's leaving his kids 1% of his fortune and said, if they can't figure out a way to do anything with this, then I've failed them anyway. And he's also going out at a time when he's made all of his money slow and steady and done it, I won't say the hard way, but you know what I mean? Like he's the opposite of Masayoshi Son we were just describing, like takes the escalator up and the elevator down. Like he's the opposite of that. He takes the stairs everywhere. So for baby boomers specifically, this is the dream for them to see this dude get to do it all on his own terms. He basically said, nature's going to call one day, but only after I tell it to. Like 95 years old and still has enough of his cognitive ability to say to people, I'm going to telegraph my retirement from this company. And it's not going to be today. It's going to be 8 months down the road.
Yeah. And I've heard these concerns before. It's like, what is Berkshire without Warren Buffett? And I wonder if at this point that's a concern troll. Anyone who is 95 years old is going to need some amount of help in running their operations. He's been telegraphing Greg Abel coming in to run the company for some time now. This is about as telegraphed and careful of a CEO handoff you could possibly get at any public or non-public company.
He did himself, though, allude to the fact that from here on out, the stock price is probably going to move a lot more than it used to. Like he used an SAT word that I don't actually use on a daily basis, capricious, but basically saying like it's going to be it's going to act a lot differently than it usually does without me at the helm. So even he tipped his hat to, I'm sure it's inevitable now.
So I took that in a different way. I took that I actually will use the title of the show. I do think this time is different because of Berkshire Hathaway's cash hoard.
Yes.
Where I think, isn't like 30% of Berkshire's market cap just cash and treasuries right now?
More, but that's still significant.
Okay. So for the stock price to move down more than 50%, that means that that would mean the equity value of everything they own needs to move down by, watch me do math in real time. Would that be like 60 to 80%, something like that?
I would say, yeah, closer to 80.
Okay. So I thought he was doing a favor by being like, throughout my tenure, we've had, 3 times in my 60-year tenure where the stock moved down 50%, and investors should be ready for the stock to move capriciously. And I think that was a mindset thing. I think he was giving the next CEO a little bit of grace, but given just the giant size of this company and the amount of cash on the books, I think unless Abel comes in and starts buying up small cap AI companies, then it's going to be extraordinarily difficult to get that type of movement for that stock.
So
maybe
no
I'm wrong.
CoreWeave in Berkshire anytime soon.
Yeah, or he wants to go buy Disney or something. But I took that as him doing the next guy a solid, not him saying like, get ready for a crash in Berkshire Hathaway stock.
Yeah, no, I didn't even think about it in terms of like, get ready for a crash. I more so meant like the Buffett put leaves with me. You know what I mean? Like we all give Apple a pass when it comes to being second or third to the next technological shift. Berkshire Hathaway gets a pass for having a down year when the rest of the market does well because they've got Warren Buffett, and the long-term track record with this dude at the helm is a lot better than most fund managers.
Okay.
So I don't know exactly what he meant. Unfortunately, we can't just call him up and ask him to explain himself, but
Maybe he likes to do podcasts. Last thing I'll say on that, though, is Apple did okay after Steve Jobs, and there was considerable, there was concern, right? Tim Cook's going to come in and he's no Steve Jobs. You can still have an operator take care of a giant and it can be okay. It doesn't necessarily mean it will be.
But he's also going out in a significantly different way than Steve Jobs. Aside from the fact that Steve Jobs passed away from pancreatic cancer, which hits you like a ton of bricks once it comes on, and it's one of the doozies from what I understand as far as cancer diagnoses are concerned. However, Steve Jobs also hid it for quite a bit of time. And so it really was sort of like all of a sudden when this transition needed to happen. Whereas Warren Buffett's ailment, if you will, is his age, and he can't hide his age. And so we've known since probably his 70th birthday that at some point, this guy's going to decide he needs to retire and take a step back and whatever. And so for the last 25 years, we've been able to say to each other, yeah, but what happens when Warren has to retire? And then now we have the answer, but it's so far down the tracks that I agree with you. He has to have been planning for that for decades, just like he plans for decades sometimes before exiting an investment position.
A couple parts of this letter too I found really interesting is there was some allusion to politics in there. One thing that I appreciated that you don't see, and we'll get to this story later, from a lot of tech billionaires in this country is, I would say, an element of patriotism, where he's saying Berkshire Hathaway is, what is it? It's an asset to America. It's not a supplicant, but he takes a tremendous amount of pride in being an American, and that, large corporations can be, not necessarily, but can be a force for good in this country. And there was a part where he kind of, he checked his privilege a little bit. He talked about how lucky he was to be able to be born in the middle of America at the time that he was born and to be healthy. And
I think he checks his privilege quite a bit.
Yeah.
For a billionaire.
Fair enough. But the part I want to get to is when he talks about healthcare. He's telling this story where he almost dies as a child, this appendectomy surgery that he has to have, and then he's in the hospital, and that he was saved by a family doctor. Quote, "Dr. Holtz called me skipper and never charged much for his visits." And I think that end part was really important. He was able to say, I was able to see this doctor. He never charged much for his visits. And I thought, to have an American healthcare system like that, where you have doctors that are interested in helping people, which I do think still exists, but you're able to see them affordably. And that may be a key reason that he was alive today, because he lived in America with a more affordable healthcare system, even though I wouldn't trade the medical technology we have right now for when Mr. Buffett came up.
Well, so also we have to consider that he's alluding to another one of the things that he thinks is wrong with America, and doing it in such a way that I think is where you're going with this. It doesn't alienate the listener no matter which side of the political aisle you decide to fall on. It is a thing that we all should be able to agree on, which is that all of us as U.S. citizens deserve access to legitimate healthcare. And only by the grace of God did he have it in the 1920s, presumably, when we're talking about here. So, I'm only here because of that. I think that's a thing that no matter how deep blue or deep red or somewhere in the middle you fall, that makes perfect logical sense to you.
It's a convincing argument. There's a theory which I agree with, which is the way you convince people of anything is through story and not statistics.
Yep.
And
just
that's
like
the kind of thing.
He has said multiple times, I pay what I'm supposed to pay to the IRS. I don't pay enough in comparison to everyone else who doesn't have nearly as much as I do. But since the tax code is what it is, I pay what I pay. I would be happy to pay more if the tax code told me I had to pay more, but since it doesn't, I don't. I think that's a perfectly logical argument that I, as a non-billionaire, can still say, yeah, that's legit. The thing is, we need to vote in people who are willing to actually do something about enforcing IRS regulation on the people who do whatever they can to get around tax rules. And as a person who's a billionaire, you hear that and you go, yeah, they don't change the rules. So I save a few bucks here and there.
Did you see how tough it was to get some of those Epstein emails released? Do you think those people are going to start cracking down on the tax code? All right.
Well, not only that, I mean, look how much has been done to intentionally dismantle the IRS under Doge and then again under the most recent government shutdown. Like the focus is obviously, let's hobble this organization so that they don't have the manpower to come after anybody who matters. So I'm not necessarily saying I believe this will happen in this America. I'm just saying I think it's very telling about him as a person that he's saying, like, I would be perfectly willing to pay more if the tax code said I had to, but I'm also no fool. So I'm not going to voluntarily pay more than I have to.
I think it's also a good time as we kind of wrap on this specific topic. Just if I know you're a tech investor, so it's easy to say I don't follow the Warren Buffett method. And, you know, I remember an interview with Oswald Damodaran where he went down to Omaha and said, how many of you are trying to exactly replicate Buffett? And a bunch of hands went up. And he said, how many of you are actually beating the market? And then he wasn't invited back to whatever conference he was speaking at. So there is a danger in trying to be like, I'm going to invest like Buffett. But there are things that you can pick up from people. And in my opinion, whether it's Warren Buffett or Eric Jackson, who's promoting Opendoor right now, you can pick up a few paragraphs, a few sentences. You don't have to follow him exactly. I have a few ways that Buffett, I think, has influenced me. But for you as a tech investor, which Buffett kind of was because he was an Apple guy, but has Buffett impacted you at all as an investor or financial advisor?
You can't call him an Apple guy because he waited until 2014 maybe to buy his first share of Apple. And at that point, Tim Cook was CEO. So what are we talking about here? But I do think the biggest, most important thing that I have taken away personally as an investor from watching how Warren Buffett operates and listening to what nuggets he's willing to share is just patience. Like just being willing to understand how compounding actually works in your favor when you let it. So a lot of the challenges that we as investors have is that we get impatient, especially those of us who were born in the what they call the microwave generation, where we expect things to all happen immediately because that's just how they work. I think it's extremely tough for people like us, people younger than me, right? I'm 37. There's several people younger than me listening to this now, but he's born in the 1920s, right? He's born at a time when your entertainment was the radio. Then it was the television with 4 channels. Then it was, your phone was a car phone physically in your car was the way that you communicated on the go. So like, he has the benefit of not being as distracted as most of us operating in modern society do. But I still think that there's something that we could learn from this old dude that's done it well in the form of just being patient and being willing to allow good ideas to come to fruition rather than jumping around from thing to thing to thing, hoping that today's going to be the day that I outsmart the markets.
Yeah. And he was a teenager when World War II ended, to give you some context on the amount of life that this man has lived. And he's, to your point, yes, he's a baby boomer's absolute dream. I think for me personally, it is that patience. It's in the way that is practiced, I think, is for me, it's keeping some cash on the sidelines. And you see, it's different for a regular investor because your options of what you can get into are significantly wider than Warren Buffett, where when you're moving something that can affect $1 trillion, you don't have as many opportunities. And having flexibility, you kind of said, oh, he wasn't an Apple guy because he went in 2014. Yeah, but he did. He was like, I'm not a tech investor. And then he learned, he was consistently learning. And then he was able to change his investing style. He got a little bit more flexible.
That's fair.
And then the last thing I will say is I'm only going to look at a balance sheet. And he wasn't really a cigar butt investor. He was at the beginning, less so, I would say, towards the end. But you can't follow that exactly as you may have when one was looking at income statements and balance sheets at a library, trying to look for undervalued opportunities when everything's on the internet right now and you're competing against algorithms. So the flexibility and the patience, I think, still pays off right now.
Could I say though, the inflexibility of never offering a dividend is part of what makes me a non-Berkshire shareholder. So don't get me wrong. I think it's beautiful that this guy has made so many thousands of people, specifically in the state of Nebraska, wealthier beyond their imagination. Like, that is beautiful. I also say, Warren, give the people a piece. You got 38 or so % of your funds sitting in cash. Give the people a piece.
Yeah.
A special dividend, just come on.
This episode is sponsored by Capital Area Planning Group. Capital Area Planning Group is a fiduciary wealth management firm that specializes in helping high net worth individuals and families navigate the complexities that come along with managing concentrated stock options, multiple income streams, and an ever-changing tax code. While our team of certified financial planners are well-versed in all things personal finance, our areas of expertise include equity compensation, estate planning, and multi-year tax planning. At Capital Area Planning Group, we believe in pricing transparency. That's why our fees are posted on our website, right alongside the various services we perform on behalf of our clients throughout the year. If you're tired of receiving the same cookie-cutter advice from your financial advisor, then don't wait. Reach out to us today at capgllc.com to experience a better approach to wealth management. Again, that web address is www.capgllc.com.
Are you ready to go to a completely different type of investor that perhaps is more reflective of where we're at in 2025?
Yeah, we're about to flip-flop for sure.
I've been looking at Opendoor more now, and maybe I'm late to the party. I think this is a very new style of stock salesmanship. And it's kind of interesting because maybe this has happened before, but when you think of the CEO of a company, they're the chief storyteller for that company. And for Opendoor, I think it's kind of different. Their chief storyteller is a hedge fund investor, someone who's very active on social media named Eric Jackson, where he led some successful initiatives to oust a CEO. The company is now led by the former operations head of Shopify, Kaz Najarian. And it's kind of interesting, as I've been exploring this company, Malcolm, when I hear Kaz in an earnings call, I get fired up. I'm like, wow, you want to take the Tesla approach to home sales and home buying. That's pretty incredible. And maybe you have room to do that. And then I'm hearing how just, I'll say aggressively sold this stock is. And it's that if you've ever seen Miss Saigon, you have the Warren Buffett approach to the American dream. And then there's also cocaine, shotguns, and prayer. That's my American dream. And what's going to happen is this stock's going to go from 8 to 82 and we'll all be partying in Vegas with the proceeds. And that's the promise of this Opendoor stock. And before we get into the business, because that's actually the most important part of talking about this company.
Yeah.
Where are you at on Opendoor? Because this is an idea I'm exploring that I both like and hate.
I think I got stuck on the hate. It reminds me very much of AMC during COVID. Not so much GameStop. I know that GameStop too had the Chewy founder super involved, and he was doing a lot to help encourage people to buy the shares, and they really loved him and following him as the mascot for GameStop, if you will. But AMC specifically, it reminds me of, because their CEO, I can't remember the guy's name, but Adam Aron, very intuitively, to his credit, seized the moment, referenced the apes, as they affectionately called themselves, in his earnings calls. He was on CNBC and Bloomberg and, Fox Business and places like that after earnings, talking about how much he loved his apes. And it made people want to be shareholders even more, to be part of the club. Slip of the tongue there.
I think that was pretty Freudian. There is a whole part of this where people are owning stocks and, I am a shareholder of PayPal, but that is not meaningful to me as a part of my identity. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they're selling this as, are you looking for a community? Come join the apes. Come join the open army. And in this case, we're not sticking it to the hedge funds like we did with GameStop. We're kind of helping a hedge fund in this case, but it's charismatic. It's fun. Come join. You're bored.
Well, that's the thing. I don't know that people are looking that deeply into it to realize that, to your point, you are on the side of the institution in this case. Before it was like, we're sticking it to the institutional investors, the so-called smart money on Wall Street that's been telling us we're dumb. In this case, like you are, like you said, you're getting into bed with a hedge funder who has a track record. So it's not like he just opened a hedge fund from scratch today and said, this is going to be my big call. And hey guys, come with me. Like, he's done it the old school way for so long. The only reason I personally know anything about this guy's attempts to help boost the stock price above 82 is because I was listening to The Compound and heard him telling the story of like him harassing Drake basically every single day in front of his house, going live and begging him to buy a share of the stock so that it would help boost the stock to 80. It sounds like market manipulation, if you ask me. Yeah. Like, I've taken, I don't know, 7 or 8 different regulatory exams at this point as a practitioner in this industry, and every single one of them is cautioning you against the things that you're allowed to say publicly and openly, and, you know, induce people to buy things and do things. All of this story sounds like it goes in the face of that. And I don't know if you heard the episode I'm referring to too, but Josh specifically was super skeptical as he's talking about this and asking the question. It's just kind of like, okay, like, I hope. I think under this administration that has shown that it's willing to allow people to play fast and loose with the rules and regulations related to the financial markets. Yes, it works for now. The market is also at an all-time high and things are good and people are feeling good. We just celebrated, another milestone on the Dow. I think it was Monday of this week that we're recording. So like, things are good. People are feeling good. There's a lot of liquidity out there. Cash is floating around. When it starts to go the other direction and the class action lawyers start to make their rounds and make their pitch to people to say, have you been negatively impacted by the statements and the comments and the opinions? Like, that's where like that trade can potentially unwind.
I guess we should disclose this podcast is for informational purposes. You shouldn't listen to anything we're talking about here. I think there's a tremendous amount of risk in it. And there is, so I listened to the Compound interview and I listened to one other interview. I'm sorry, I don't remember the title of it. I should. I should. It was a much friendlier one. It was people who self-identified as being in the open army. And I found 2 red flags in that. One is they kind of, in the Compound interview, they kind of pressured him into being like, but you don't think people should like be putting all of their money into open, right? And it's like, yeah, I guess like people need to make responsible decisions. But also I met someone who has millions of dollars in their full portfolio in Opendoor. And we got lunch together and it was a wonderful time. And no part of that story was he like, and I told him that maybe he should diversify and keep some cash on the sideline. And this could, melt into nothing, because not that it may melt into nothing, but this has been a 50-cent stock before.
Yes.
Turning around a company, and I don't want to discount Kaz's ability to do this. Running operations for Shopify is an incredible thing. Turning around a company is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And it often takes significantly longer than retail shareholders want to give a new leader leash for, especially when we're in that microwave economy. And also the business itself, which I want to get into, iBuying seems pretty tough, even with AI, which is we're going to give you an offer on your house with just pictures and videos. And our secret sauce to doing this is just the amount of pictures and videos we have with other houses. There still could be adverse selection in this, which is an AI system may not know something that someone walking through a house and is able to smell and hear what the neighbors are doing as just a computer system is. So I have some questions on that. And then the biggest flag for me was a much quieter part of that Compound interview. And that was when he was talking about Carvana, which for him was a 100-bagger. Congratulations. I understand the game he's playing. You're going for slugging percentage. It's not my style of investing, but I know there are people that do this tremendously successfully. But then he said something that caught my attention, which is that he said, I don't have a position in Carvana right now. And he said that kind of quietly. He did not make a big declaration on X, from what I've seen when I asked Grok to go through the guy's posts about when he was selling Carvana. So if he didn't make a big stink about selling Carvana, is it possible that let me phrase this carefully because I don't want to get sued. Is it possible that he will not make a big stink if he decides to sell Opendoor at $81 instead of $82, which is where he promised everyone? That's our mount that we're going toward. He doesn't own 5% or more of the company, so he's not filing regulatory reports on this. This is a private hedge fund, so seems like he can kind of do whatever he wants. So I am interested in this stock, despite what I'm saying, for reasons I'm going to get into, but I think that it is worth knowing how you are being sold something, whether you are a normal person listening to this show or you are Drake's bodyguard outside of his house wondering, why is this guy coming up to the gate, making videos, begging Drake to buy just one share of this stock?
I mean, you just said a lot, so I
can keep going. Do you want me to keep going? I'll
say two things specific to that, and then I want to also go back to a point that you were making about penny stocks, which I think is really important. So, one, what you are referring to, not at all saying that the words that you just said are in any way making the claim that you believe this is a pump and dump scheme.
I do not believe that this is a pump and dump scheme. I don't believe it.
But I do want to make caution for the listener who might be in the open army listening to this, that this has some of the markings of that. And so the point that you made about no one ever rings a bell at the top basically and says, hey guys, this has been fun, I'm out, a la, Roaring Kitty. This to me also says, if 82 is the number that you've been told to focus all of your attention on, because that's all of our collective exit point, the same way GameStop, I think, was 400 on the nose, was supposed to be everyone's collective exit point. Pay attention to the selling that happens at 350. Pay attention to the selling that happens at 78. Pay attention to, because that is probably where the quote unquote smart money has already been made. And anyone who's going for this ride to be part of the club and part of the crew, and you're showing just how committed you are by showing off your diamond hands every time you get online, and just please, that is where the exit probably is for the biggest cheerleaders of this. But also, I don't think he can get away with not making some kind of an announcement in this case, simply because with Carvana, yes, he was tweeting about it, but people weren't paying nearly as much attention there as they are now. The amount of attention he's been able to get for himself by posting these videos and involving Drake in the whole equation has widened the audience farther than I know he could have possibly imagined it would have been. So he has to, at some point, make a formal statement via social media or whatever, letting folks know, hey, I no longer have a stake in this thing.
Who is making him do that, though?
Yeah, that's fair.
He has to.
That's fair. I don't mean literally, technically, he legally has to.
Yeah.
But you got to. Whether it's from your private jet when it lands in Croatia or wherever you decide to go, to distance yourself from the army when it's time to, however you do it, you got to make that announcement.
I'm going to bring us back on track to the actual company. And sort of an investing lesson I've learned, which there are times that I absolutely I feel a pit in my stomach. I'm I hate this. This seems stupid and it's going to wreck a lot of people. And I remember that with 3 specific companies. Elon Musk doing Doge, Bitcoin a few years ago, where I was listening to a PJ Vote podcast then called Crypto Island. And he's I was at this convention of Bitcoin fans, and there was no real dream pulling them together other than the promise that we'll all get rich together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's worked out for Bitcoin so far. And MicroStrategy, which, hey, MicroStrategy has just turned their company into essentially a bomb on their balance sheet where they're borrowing money against their Bitcoin to go buy more Bitcoin. And all 3 of those times I've been wrong. So what do I despise about this company? I despise the way that the stock is being sold. The hey, come join, come gain a collective identity by owning shares of a iBuying real estate firm. But also that is you have an intoxicating storyteller that is leading the way on it. You have a real executive, someone who has run operations for Shopify, making shareholder-friendly actions where, hey, if you're a shareholder right now, we're going to give you warrants for a stock at certain prices. So as we hit certain milestones, you basically get a dividend. That's impressive to me. You're seeing large insider ownership of the company, which, yes, you should have some questions about, but I don't think I could immediately dismiss this thing as a big fat scam.
You're basically telling me, though, that you want to have me be able to buy a house the same way I can buy coffee filters from Amazon. Like literally that's how, you want me to be able to buy a house the same way I can buy a brand new Hyundai from Amazon. Let's say that. iBuying has already been proven to be a flawed model in the sense that real estate is hyperlocal. And so it's tough to have an algorithm do what a human person, boots on the ground, neighborhood by neighborhood is capable of doing. And it's why so many people with institutional money got out of that business back in 2020 when they did. So maybe they were early and there is really a business model there. And that's what you're making this bet based on. But realistically, I shouldn't say never, but in this time span, in the next 12, 24 months, I'm not going to convince enough people to be willing to buy a home on the internet the way they're willing to buy a Hyundai on Amazon and think that that is where my payoff is. That's how I get to $82 a share.
I think that's a totally fair take, right? If I'm buying a Tesla, that is a standardized unit. An existing home is not a standardized unit of selling. And maybe artificial intelligence will make it better, but maybe sometimes the solution is not just throwing AI at a hyper-local economic problem. I think that's a totally fair take. And do I want to move on to this next story? I feel like I'm pretty good on Opendoor. I feel like I'm in a spot of, I know there's this like, I wish I could give you a I'm buying this, I'm selling this. Right now I am looking at it like an interesting bird, where I'm like, wow, that is a merganser. That is an interesting bird. And I'm watching it and then I move on with my day. But it is something where I'm like, maybe I don't have to join the Open Army, but maybe I can join the Open National Guard. Maybe.
So no, but I get it. I don't remember what the fish is that swims underneath a shark and eats the little tidbits that are left over from whatever the shark eats. Amora, maybe? I don't know. Something like that.
If you know, let us know in the Spotify comments.
But it's something like that. And I think what you're describing is that style of investing where like, I'm just going to float alongside underneath the gigantic sea creature that's going along doing its thing. And if there's any crumbs that just happen to come my way on the outskirts, I'm there, but I don't have to be a part of the bigger group that's going in that direction.
I will take it as a compliment that you're calling me a sucker fish that eats algae off of a shark. No, I haven't.
No, it's a safe bet, right? Like, the shark's going to eat at some point, and based on how the shark eats, something's got to come flying off of there at some point, and I'm going to be here to catch that rebound.
Let's go on to this other real estate story real quick. I guess we're making this a real estate show. This is something you sent me because you wanted to ruin my afternoon, which is this company called Arrived. And at first I looked at this, I'm like, this isn't bad. And for context, this is making some headlines because they just got money from Mark Benioff and Jeff Bezos's venture fund. I think they got like $27 million. Mm-hmm. And what they are doing on the surface is democratizing ownership of single family homes. So like what Rally has done with collectibles, where you can own a share of a very rare Pokemon card, they're doing that with single family homes. So you can go onto this marketplace and buy like $100 share in, $400,000 single family home on the outskirts of Nashville, Tennessee. And there's renters in there. And as they pay their rent and as this company pays for expenses, they'll share the difference with you. And hopefully you make some income. And then maybe when they go to sell the house, there will be a price appreciation that the shareholders can benefit from. And when I first looked at this, I was like, you know what? The average person is putting the way I mathed it out is the average person was putting like $400 onto the platform. Okay, whatever. Seems like people are having fun with this. And then I just thought about it for 5 more minutes. and realized, no, I hate this. This is institutional money coming in for more fractional ownership. It may start with that, which is what Kalshi and all the prediction markets did. But as soon as more money comes in, it's going to be more institutional ownership of single family homes in the United States. And that is just, I'll use another SAT word, deleterious to the American dream. This is something that should be stopped by government. It should not be celebrated. And in fact, I think it should be illegal.
You know how you watch those commercials for the holidays, specifically around Christmas, where people are sharing gifts and grandma's sitting on the couch and somebody opens a present and it's like, oh my God, thanks, Grandma. And she's like, I saw this and I immediately thought of you. That was how I felt reading this story.
Aww.
Like I immediately thought of you and I said, I have to interrupt his day to make sure that he saw this, because I agree with you. I think so I won't re-say anything that you just said. My somewhat separate take on this was the market has the potential, because of the way that all of, gaming and everything has wired people's brains to think about instantaneous activity. And you got to constantly be doing something as it relates to your money now. I was thinking about how many times the actual value of the underlying property, the tokens or the stock shares related to that property could get. Similar to like we sit on the desk when I'm on CNBC and debate whether NVIDIA should be selling at 40 times next year's earnings, right? So 40 times the actual, what you would consider to be value of this thing. Or, it's trading at 2 or 3 times its book value or whatever the valuation metric is. In this case, we're talking about an asset that has the potential to be trading at 5 times, 10 times, 20 times its actual market value because of how rapidly the tokens or the shares have been sold on a daily basis. That's the thing that starts to look crazy and gets out of control to me. Because I saw in there that like in the 3 weeks since this thing has been live, investors have submitted 57,000 buy and sell transactions.
Oof.
There can't be 57,000 homes on the platform yet. So who's buying and selling? And there probably aren't 57,000 users on the platform yet. Oh, it's 500 properties so far that they have. So 500 properties across 65 cities. 57,000 transactions have already been placed in 3 weeks. So that's my whole point. Like we start to trade these things that aren't actually worth it. It becomes NFTs.
Yeah. We're turning single family homes into NFTs because the actual value, like the inputs are not changing that much. Even NVIDIA, which the inputs change based on sentiment, but also a quarterly basis, right? As we update, or even more than that, right? They get a certain deal with OpenAI that investors can then price in. We're going to change in our GPUs, and maybe there's some sovereign data centers that we're being a part of, and there's changes based on that. This is literally just like, all right, we got a nurse and somebody who works at a bank, and they live together in one of these houses, and that is reflective of their income and the property market around that. How are you pricing that much differential in here by making this trade as a stock? And the other thing that I found that to me was it was a little bit of a flag is when they list a property on there, they don't do necessarily the real city. So I looked at some of the houses on there, and I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. Independence, Kentucky is not Cincinnati, Ohio. And in fact, it's in another state. Yeah. And when they listed the property, they're like, yeah, this is in Cincinnati, or it's in the Cincinnati area, just minutes away from downtown. You're not in the I-275 circle. You should have listed Independence, Kentucky, but maybe that's not appealing to an investor who's quickly scanning through. Or how about the hot real estate location of Nashville, Tennessee? Single family homes in Nashville, Tennessee. That sounds hot. A lot of people want to move to the Sun Belt. No, it's in Lebanon, Tennessee. That's about 45 minutes away from the city center. So one of the things I don't like, in addition to the creating institutional buyers against young families who you want them to buy houses in America and have jobs and have families, and this kind of, I'm doing a clean show, this kind of stuff makes that more difficult, and everyone should be opposed to it. For someone quickly scanning through a property, they have to dig a little bit deeper to get the full story.
But also, just who asked for this? Like in the grand scheme of things, like I don't really understand what problem you're solving. You've effectively created a real estate investment trust. You've petitioned the SEC for over a year to allow you to have each one of these individual properties be treated as a standalone real estate investment trust for qualified dividend purposes. Well, there's like 50 gazillion real estate investment trusts I could already buy and invest in. Why did I need more? So what problem did you solve?
I mean, financialization is just layers on layers on layers. So financial companies will always want to add more layers to thing as a holistic thing. So that's ultimately what they're doing. Why do we need a 2x levered Bitcoin ETF?
Oh, well, that's different. That's different.
That's different.
I need that leverage to entice me to be willing to buy the Bitcoin in the first place. I can't just take that ride. I don't know what the standard deviation has to be on one Bitcoin token, but I can't just take that crazy ride that's going to go from 150,000 per coin down to 75 and back up to 108 by the end of the year. I need to 2x that. That's how I really feel alive.
All right, you ready for me to get more controversial after I said that I think that this is horrible for it's not horrible. This movement,
I don't know if we have enough listeners yet for you to be alienating people, but continue.
I don't think there's for the 3 people who are left. If someone were to tell me like, hey, I bought a $100 share in 10 or 20 individual homes is just a little bit of diversification, I don't think I would I'd be like, okay, that doesn't, for you personally, like, all right, it doesn't sound dumb. Like, I understand why people would put some money into that, but I also think that this is, from a larger scale, not good for people.
Well, that's why I said, like, just take the money and treat somebody you love to a nice dinner. It's been my experience whenever I sit down with somebody who is managing a portfolio in this way, or usually it's like 8 different accounts at a bunch of different brokerages that own a bunch of the same stuff. There's a ton of overlap, but they own it in different accounts in different quantities and really have no idea what's happening where. It's just like, oh, I got some cash over here, and so I want to buy shares of Open, so I'm going to take that cash and buy Open here. And it ends up being 80% of that particular account and 14% of their overall portfolio. Like, it's usually not a meaningful enough amount of money being included here for it to really make enough of a difference to have an impact on your financial life, even if it does go well. So it's really just about the fun, the gamification of the process.
I think that's very fair. And you can own home builders. You can own things in public markets that are building houses.
Here's a novel idea. Yeah. You can own a house.
All right, let's wrap up on this listener question. We got a listener question. I was really happy about that. This is from Alex Tran 3434. He commented on Spotify. You're welcome to do the same if you have a question, or you can email thistimepod@gmail.com. And he asked, how will the new New York City mayor impact markets downstream? I have a take on it. I don't think it'll really impact markets. There are some New York City specific real estate investment trusts, Empire State Realty Trust, for Vornado Realty Trust, and SL Green. They own office space, buildings, some residential stuff in Manhattan. They've taken a hit on this, is, worries about rent freezes, that kind of thing. But outside of that, I don't have a great answer.
Yeah, I read that and said, man, Mamdani really has people shook.
Yeah.
The real answer is not a lot. Like, the mayor of a city has almost zero jurisdiction over anything related to financial markets. I get that because it's New York. We assume he has some relationship with Wall Street. But I mean, it's the SEC that's got oversight there. It's the Department of Justice that's got oversight there. It's the New York Attorney General's office that's got oversight there. So not really much and he's going to be too busy trying to figure out how to bring groceries and healthcare to everyone. So he's not going to have time to be worried about the stock market.
Rent. He's got to work with the Rent Guidelines Board to freeze all the rents, I think. Jeff
Bezos and Mark Benioff have an idea. Maybe they should get together and work out the real estate problem together.
This is why I do think sometimes Earth exists as a reality television show for aliens, because as we're setting up season 2026 of this, it's like, let's see what Mamdani does in New York. Let's have the most capitalist city in America enter into a socialist. And I don't want to dismiss why people voted for him. The affordability crisis there is real, and he was the only candidate to speak to that. But I think that from a political perspective, I don't know, there were other things that happened in the midterms for the Democrats where more centrist candidates won. So I don't know if this is a exact hey, this is where this is just the first wave of widespread socialism coming to America, which maybe that impacts markets, but we're talking about the New York City mayor. We're not the Chicago mayor, the Boston mayor, the mayor of Denver. We're not talking about how those impact financial markets.
Yeah. So I'll say this. I don't live in New York, so I have absolutely no dog in this fight whatsoever. However, I am interested to see what he can actually manage to pull off. And I'm also encouraged by the fact that he's as young as he is. So those two things together for me are enough for me to be excited about watching how this thing plays out. But again, I don't have to really bear any of the consequences in either direction.
All right. We'll say goodbye to the listener. We'll say goodbye to Curtis Sliwa, as I will miss him so much from the news cycle. All right. Thanks for listening. If you're enjoying the show, if you've made it this far, rating it on Apple Podcasts is a great way to help us out. Telling a friend that you think may enjoy this show is also really helpful. I'm at Rick So Slick on X, Ricky Mulvey on LinkedIn. You can find Malcolm at Malcolm on Money.
Information shared in this recording and by its guests represent the views and opinions of the guests and does not represent the views or opinions of the host. This content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. This content is not, nor is it intended to be a substitute for professional financial advice. It is always recommended that you seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your personal financial situation.